Hello and welcome to another fully live Q&A episode of Hacking with Friends. Today we have, as we're calling him, Michael number 3, James, on to help us host the show. James, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
And of course, update on Michael's cryptozoology conference. We got a very cryptic message demanding 10,000 Dogecoin in order to ever see him again. So I assume Michael needs some money to further fund his cryptozoology. Thankfully, Dogecoin has taken a dive, so maybe we'll see Michael again sometime soon. But at least we know that he's doing well, sending us cryptic messages from his cryptozoology quest. All right, moving on. So today we're going to be answering a series of questions we've gotten on our YouTube channel. So if you've been on any of our streams and you haven't had your questions answered, this is the stream for you. We've been doing a series on operating systems. So this is also a great time to ask questions about any of the operating systems we've covered over the last couple weeks. Now, James, let's see, we just did Ubuntu. We have done Black Arch. Helped me do the list because we've really done a lot.
So OpenBSD, Black Arch, Manjaro, Ubuntu. Did I say Black Arch?
Yeah, you said Black Arch.
Okay. What else did we do? Pen2. There's too many to count. Hunix, Qubes.
And then we haven't released it yet, but we've also done one on Fedora. So we could potentially answer some questions on Fedora as well. So that's 8 operating systems that we've covered. According to my count, we actually probably have done more. It's just like we've kind of gotten
we probably forgot one.
And so if you have any questions about any of these operating systems versus another, or what it takes to set one up, or anything involving any of those OSs, this is a great time to ask. We're also going to roll back through any comments that we've gotten on our YouTube channel and answer any good questions we have. We like to do this just because, again, if you don't get your question in the stream and you want to make sure that we see it and answer it, just leave it on the YouTube channel because we're still a pretty small YouTube channel. We see all the comments and we respond to as many as we can. So if we don't get your question on YouTube, we'll usually actually just answer it here. So if you have another question and we don't have time to answer it on this stream, or if one comes up while you're on the live chat and it's not answered to your satisfaction, feel free to drop it on the YouTube channel. That's SecurityFWD. And you can find out more episodes and more information at hackingwithfriends.com, where you can also sign up for our mailing list. A lot of people have, and we actually haven't sent anything out yet because we haven't had any major events, but we are looking at having some awesome giveaways and some other events coming up really soon. Okay, is Zam here? Thank goodness. So I also want to thank Zam for sending us a wonderful gift for our set. Over my shoulder, you may notice that there's some toilet paper, like right here. This is the plaque to the year 2020 that says "Never Forget," that was sent to us by our moderator, Zam. So thank you very much, Zam, for this new piece of our set. And if anybody asks why I have toilet paper hovering over my shoulder, that is why. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Yeah, and one question I already see in the chat is whether or not we're going to cover Kali NetHunter. And I should mention, thanks to the fact that Zam has sent us the exact phone that we need to do this, we are going to be covering Kali NetHunter and going through what it takes to set it up and how you can use it. We still need to figure out how we're going to show the screen on the stream, but whatever, we'll figure it out. So anyway, it's going to be really fun, and we will be able to cover a topic a lot of people have been asking us about for a very long time, and that is all thanks to Zam. So big thank you to him for being able to let us cover some stuff we've never covered before. And frankly, I had just kind of given up on it because it requires an Android phone that's a specific model. I didn't have one lying around, and it was really awesome of him to step up and give us one to be able to do this. So thank you very much to him. Oh yeah, and it is a 3D printed toilet paper roll, as Sam wants everyone to know. It's not the real thing. He really went the full 9 yards and actually printed like a full roll of fake toilet paper that was convincing enough that one of our roommates took it and put it on like the communal bathroom roll of toilet paper, which one of our other roommates did not think was funny because it was actually quite convincing. All right, so let's go. Yeah, yes, I know. So let's go ahead and take a look at our first question, which was on our Qubes OS video. And this question I feel like is for James, and it's please name that specific bootloader. Now, kind of context, this is James's setup, right? Like this is your baby, and the hardware on this computer and this whole setup is a little bit unique. So can you explain like what your baby is to these people so they understand what we're dealing with here?
Okay, so I have a ThinkPad T430 laptop, which I have modded the CPU in and modded the cooler in basically to make it faster and still work and not burn itself to oblivion. But the other thing that you can do with the T420 is you can Coreboot it. So this is less in relation to Qubes and more in relation to Coreboot. But when you Coreboot a laptop, you have to, in most cases at least, take it out and attach a chip programmer to your BIOS chip and do some funky stuff that, you can fry your motherboard pretty easily if you do this the wrong way, but I managed to not do that. I melted a few wires, but thankfully nothing broke, so it was all good. But this question is in relation to what payload I'm running inside of Coreboot, I think, and I am running Tiana Core, which is for UEFI, and then the other popular one is CBIOS, I think, which is I could be completely wrong in that, but I think that's MBR partitioning. So to be honest with you, I don't know a whole lot about the specific benefits of each payload, so I can't talk a ton about it. But yeah, my friend Dutchy just said use this one, and he knows what he's talking about. So I said okay, and here we are.
Yes, yeah. So can you explain what the benefit of doing this is? Like, why would for anybody who's not interested in this topic, like, why would somebody want to do this, and like, what benefit does it give you over just keeping it stock?
So you get more control over it. So now I can actually just like read and write from the BIOS chips if I want to from within an operating system. The other aspect is in terms of privacy and security, there's a thing called Intel ME system, which is how do I explain this? It's like a subsystem on the processor that was developed by Intel in conjunction with the NSA. So it's a little bit sus. It's viewed by some, including me, as a security risk. AMD has an equivalent, but on older laptops. So this is the reason why I have such an old laptop, is because it's easier to do this on laptops where I don't even remember what it's called. The North Bridge or the South Bridge is still separate from the CPU chip or whatever. It's apparently easier to code, but Coreboot is an open source project for your BIOS essentially. So you can use an open source BIOS rather than a kind of closed source blob on your BIOS chip that may have security vulnerabilities and has the Intel ME engine, which is not good in my opinion. So you get some security and privacy benefits by going through all this trouble. It's pretty overkill for most people, but I figured I'd go ahead and do it.
Do you remember the specific security vulnerability for IME? Because
IME? You mean?
Or what?
Intel, yeah, IME, Intel ME engine, yeah.
Yeah, because I feel like...
Or Intel Management Engine, oopsie.
Management engine, okay. Management. Because I'm just curious if it was related to the like Spectre and Meltdown thing, because every time you say that, I always... When you want to update Intel for... Okay, yeah, no, it totally is. Yeah, it is. I just wanted to confirm it really quick. I just like horribly typed like a really like messed up like Google search, but it still like redirected me to telling us that we have to update our Intel management engine to mitigate against Meltdown and Spectre vulnerabilities. So the reason why I asked is because, what you're describing is actually like a really cool feature that speeds up how fast laptops go, or like how fast a computer goes, by doing speculative execution. So it guesses what the next command is going to be and then executes it in advance. And then like if that's not the right command, it rolls it back. But if it was, then the computer is a step ahead of itself, basically. But like there was
I think we're maybe thinking of slightly different things here, but
okay.
So I think if I'm correct, I think the Spectre and Meltdown, or at least one of them, was in relation to predictive branching, which sounds like what you're describing. But I think Intel Management Engine is separate. I could be wrong. My understanding isn't fantastic of what's going on there.
Yeah, the vulnerability with that was, what I was going to say is, they were able to train it to speculatively execute like malicious commands by like giving it bad data over a period of time, like through like a vulnerability. So this is like one of the reasons why a lot of people were very wary about using stock configurations on certain processors or like on like certain systems, because there were these built-in vulnerabilities that were really difficult to know. Like it's just like such an abstract problem that most people would just like run a stock configuration on something and not take the time to actually like change any of these settings. So just pointing out that there are like vulnerabilities out there that affect like hardware and these things that manufacturers add to a piece of hardware to make it more useful or more fast that certain people might not want running. I mean, unless you can think of like another example of like a reason why not to run, why you should core boot your computer instead of like running like a specific like AMD thing.
Yeah, it's so sorry, Zam has just said Intel Management Engine is actually great for managing systems in bulk if you can figure it out. The docs are not very good. Yeah, so there's two ads. Certainly in like an enterprise setting, it can be a really useful tool, it seems like, but whereas it's just my private computer and I don't want potentially people looking at what I'm doing using a subsystem on my processor, because you have to like keep in mind that's completely out of the control of like your operating system or whatever. It's all the way down the chain. So no matter what you're doing right on top, I guess there are probably mitigating circumstances, but if you have a vulnerability all the way at the bottom of your kind of stack, then it's not ideal. So there you go. That's why I wanted to do it.
So it's a potential risk, but there's not like a specific example of like why to core boot.
Hold on, I'm reading.
It's okay. Yeah, I'm just like this is a kind of a pain, like in order to do so. But some people really insist on it, and like there's an entire line of laptops that are specifically designed around this concept of stripping out all this like optional vendor stuff that people plug in, and again, it's like if you're trying to do this by yourself, it's kind of a pain. Like James melted wires, but you could fry your motherboard. So the risks are much more than like the average person would probably want to do to a laptop they really love and treasure. But if this is something you're really passionate about, it'd be good to know like like a specific example of like why this might come back to bite you if you're focused on privacy and like you still have something running at the bottom of your stack that like you don't control.
Let me just explain. On the T430 specifically, this was an absolute pain to do. You had to completely disassemble the laptop, like to the point where you have to take off the CPU cooler and take out everything and separate the motherboard. And because it's on the bottom, the chips are on the bottom of the motherboard, which is covered by like a magnesium cage. So it was a whole thing. You have to take it all the way apart. But just reading on Wikipedia, apparently there were 3 vulnerabilities announced in 2018, and it seems to be in relation to the it seems to be a security vulnerability in relation to Intel ME, but there are several things just like listed on Wikipedia, but so I'm sure there have been things that have gone wrong in the past, but there are updates for the ME, so.
Cool. All right. So one question we had in the chat was how different is the job of a red team versus a blue team? And James, do you have a take on that?
Sorry, what was the question?
How different is the job of a red team versus a blue team?
Well, I mean, they do the opposite, don't they? Is it my understanding is that a blue team is defensive security, red team is pen testing, right?
Right. Well, yeah. So the red team's responsible for continuously testing the barrier and making sure that any common attacks or any attacks that are likely for the business to face are executed and reported back on whether or not they were successful. So they're supposed to do a continuous cycle of looking for cracks in the armor based on what's likely in like the current environment for the business to actually face. Like it's supposed to be a real world test and an evaluation totally impartially of how the business is doing against, really like basic stuff or things that like anybody would have access to. If they're paid a lot, then maybe like, it's more than that. And their goal is to make sure that even advanced threats can't get in. But like on a very, very basic level, they're supposed to simulate real world threats and give actionable information back to the blue team. or whoever's in charge of making sure that security changes are implemented. Now, the blue team's job is to basically catch the red team and also lay enough traps and have enough methods of detection to make sure that they are able to respond to an attack very, very quickly. So they have the much more difficult job of looking on a large number of fronts and being up against any number of these free and easily available tools that are out there, and also responsible for dealing with vulnerabilities that pop up all the time very quickly. Because the job of the red team is to take advantage of publicly disclosed vulnerabilities, and before like an adversary has a chance to attack the infrastructure or run a simulated attack of the infrastructure and show how vulnerable the business is to it. So like these forces work in tension with each other, and the blue team, I think, again, has the less sexy and much more difficult job because they are constantly at the mercy of all these things that are outside their control, whereas an attacker can pick and choose from all these tools and really has the advantage of sitting back, doing surveillance, like looking at what the target looks like, and then picking the best and easiest to use tool out of a vast tool set of just available tools. So blue team work is harder. I would argue it's more valuable because if you can't have a team that understands these threats and acts on it, you could be getting, you can have the best red team in the world that just constantly keep telling you you're hacked. And that's not good. You should stop them sometimes. I mean, sometimes they should win if they're really good, but other times you should have a team that's able to detect and stop modern threats. That's the whole point of having a blue team. So that's kind of the difference between a red team and a blue team. They focus on totally different things. With blue team methodology, you're focused on detection, mitigation, and making sure that you're in good shape to deal with a breach and basically assume you're going to get breached and have a plan where nobody is panicking when that happens. So I would say if you're interested in defense, you can get a lot of great work doing blue team stuff. And that's learning about honeypots, learning about detection, learning about intrusion detection systems, firewalls, like all that stuff all relates to blue teams, whereas breaking into all of that stuff usually relates to red teams. So hopefully that is a useful answer to that question. All right, I'm going to check in the chat and see if there's any other... Oh, also, hello, we're doing fine. Thank you for asking. Tiny Japanese symbol. Let's see.
Japanese symbol also asked what the best laptop for core booting in 2021 is.
Oh, please feel free to answer.
I mean, there are lots of old ThinkPad laptops. I think the ThinkPad X220 off the top of my head, I could have that name completely wrong, but I think that one's pretty easy to core boot, but it's also pretty old. Like the access to the chip is apparently easy from what I've heard. But in terms of you want like an easy solution with modern hardware, System 76, they sell systems that come pre-installed with Coreboot. So that's probably the best way to do it. But I think they have a slightly proprietary system because the hardware will actually modern hardware is pretty difficult to Coreboot, basically, is the bottom line.
So the next question that we have relates to the Raspberry Pi 400. That is something I actually don't have yet. Thank you for reminding me. I'm gonna literally on the stream, I'm gonna buy this on Amazon and have it shipped to me because I believe it's available now, and why not, right? So the Raspberry Pi 400 is this weird little computer. Wait, they're $100.
Keyboard.
Yeah.
It's kind of.
Let's go to my screen. For some reason, it's taking me to eBay, but whatever. So this is what it looks like. It's this weird little enclosed computer. That's it. It's not this isn't it. It's this. This is the computer. It's just the keyboard. So I mean, one of the things with the Raspberry Pi is you always need to buy peripherals. Usually you need a keyboard, a mouse, and then a bunch of other stuff to get it working. In this case, they just stuck a Raspberry Pi inside a keyboard, which I mean, I guess it makes sense, right? And I believe that the 400 is a reference to, I'm kind of guessing here because again, I don't have one, but I believe it's a reference to having a Raspberry Pi 4 inside of it because the options for buying it are the exact same as buying a Raspberry Pi 4. So I would say you probably want to have as much memory on it as possible. So the version that has the most you can afford is probably what you want to go with, because I know the lowest memory amount cannot run Kali Linux or some of the other operating systems that we would want to run, they're a bit more minimal. So on the Raspberry Pi 4, more memory is better. So definitely consider some of the higher end options on the Raspberry Pi like 400 if that's what you want to do, because you might just end up with a keyboard that doesn't run what you want it to run. So yeah, make sure it has a good amount of space on it, and you should be fine. But yeah, it says it's a Raspberry Pi 4 based personal computer. So the exact same rules that you'll see when you are looking up Kali Linux on the Raspberry Pi 4 or Ubuntu on the Raspberry Pi 4. Like if you want to run 64-bit Ubuntu on the Raspberry Pi 4, you can totally do it, but you need the highest or the higher end models of the Raspberry Pi 4. The lower end one will not work because it doesn't have enough memory. So yeah, but I'm going to buy one of these because I really want to try it out. I think it's an interesting concept. You know, like, and you can't have too many Raspberry Pis either. So yeah, hopefully I will have a better answer on this, and maybe we will do a video on setting up Kali Linux on the Raspberry Pi 400. If you guys are interested, let us know in the comments, because I am suddenly interested in this because it sounds kind of cool. Just having a little like it just looks like a keyboard. Just having that with me all the time and being able to plug it in, and suddenly I have like a Kali Linux computer. If it also supports Wi-Fi hacking, like that's actually kind of cool, because you could like plug it into, theoretically anyway, you could plug it into like another computer, make it look like you're typing on it, but instead you have like a separate computer you're VNC'd into that you're like doing stuff on. So there's a lot of like really cool stuff you could do with that. All right, let's go ahead and look at the next question, which is, okay. Thank you for this. Just curious, do you know if it's possible to do a BLE Sniffer with the ESP32 as well? So yes, there are projects that do Bluetooth low energy sniffing on the ESP32. The ESP32S is the new version of the ESP32 that has a lot of really exciting changes, like native USB, so it supports CircuitPython and MicroPython really easily. You can just drag and drop a file and run it on the board, which is really cool. So I would recommend using the ESP32S2 for that if it's what you want to do. But there are some projects out there. I think Tabazo is somebody that works with Stefan that has a couple really cool projects that I personally have not been able to get running for the ESP32 that allow you to do Bluetooth sniffing. It's a really interesting topic. Unfortunately, I, again, was not able to get it running because it was a little bit outside. It's not just like opening it in Arduino and flashing it to the board. There's like some other stuff you need to do in order to prepare the chip for it. So yes, there are projects out there. No, I can't really tell you about them, but I have done some basic Bluetooth sniffing with the ESP32, and it is not that hard. Now, the nature of how Bluetooth devices connect and present themselves is a little bit tricky. They tend to randomize their MAC addresses a lot for most devices, and there's some other like oddities with it as well. It's not as easy as snooping on, for example, Wi-Fi connections. So I can't say that it's as easy by any means necessary as doing Wi-Fi sniffing on the ESP32 or the ESP8266. But yes, it is possible, and it's really cool that it is possible. So hopefully you'll be able to find some good projects out there, because yes, it is something that people could do. Just not me, because it's hard. So, okay, one question we had on our one of our most popular videos on the entire show, which is the next question, by the way, was for our exposed stalkers over Wi-Fi with a war driving skateboard. James, did you ever watch this video?
Not yet, but or maybe I saw part of it. I think I watched a part of it, but it was a while back. I don't remember all the details.
So our friend Alex Lin made this device that is a Raspberry Pi with a wireless network adapter strapped under a skateboard. And he would skate around, and it would do is run Kismet and make a log of every Wi-Fi access point and client that it sees as he skateboards around. Oh, and it also has a GPS chip, so it's also recording the location. So when he gets back, he runs just a Python script in Pandas to be able to identify any MAC address that was seen in two locations that were too far apart to be the same device. So basically what he's looking for is there a cell phone or like an access point or anything that I'm seeing like a mile apart that couldn't possibly be me just reading a static device, meaning that person is either following you or maybe they're like stuck in traffic behind you for like a really long time. But either way, it lets you see any, like, you can basically set it to any like radius of like how far away like a potentially like stalking device is. But we did an experiment where Alex skated around in like a big circle, and I like drove to one position and stood there with my cell phone, and then I drove to a second position and stood there with my cell phone, and he was able to, on a map, like plot the exact two places where I was, because he just ran a simple search to see, hey, has the MAC address of this phone existed in any place more than like, 5 blocks away from each other? And it was like, yes. And it was the only signal that had that characteristic. So it was, actually, no, he also was able to see the driver of the car who was driving me around, his cell phone as well. So it was a really cool example of how your cell phone leaves a digital trail everywhere you go. And even a kid skating around on a skateboard can see, if you're following them around by your cell phone. So of course there's some mitigation to this. If you have MAC address randomization, then it's not as effective. But it was still a really cool example. So the question here was like, what is the radius that you're expecting to see devices? And for a Raspberry Pi with just a little wireless network adapter that doesn't have an external antenna, I would expect to see maybe 1 block deep all the way around us, with the exception of maybe if something's elevated or particularly strong, maybe 2, maybe even 3 blocks back. For really strong access points or things that are elevated, like maybe by a window, that almost have like a line of sight. Aside from that, though, you really don't see very far on the skateboard. So when you're just skating around with the creep detector is the name of his project, then you can expect that you're getting like a spotlight around you of about a block, maybe a block and a half as you skate around. And if anybody goes through that spotlight and then later on in your route goes through that spotlight again, his program will highlight and show you, hey, this device showed up in this like Motorola device showed up in these 2 places that were like a half mile apart. Meaning it's very probable that this person was following you, or at least was in 2 places that you were, even if you didn't notice it. So I almost want to just start like running this like on like a watch or something, just so that it'll like beep at me if like someone's just like full on stalking me, because it seems like something from like like a spy movie, but it's just Python and a little bit of signals intelligence. So I'm like a huge signals intelligence nerd. Like I think it's super cool that there's radio signals that can tell you about like what people are doing around you, where you can literally see through walls and tell if someone's like on their phone or on their computer or on their TV, and even like what they're doing if you know how to decrypt the packets. So like signals intelligence is really incredible and really cool, and Wi-Fi is a part of that. And this is like a really awesome signals intelligence project where, again, you can literally just catch people that are following you by doing some analysis of the Wi-Fi signals around you as you just walk or skate around, or drive, I guess would work too. So super, super cool, and something I recommend everybody check out if you haven't, because it's one of our best episodes. And unfortunately, we can't record episodes like that really so much anymore because of the pandemic. But it has, I think, one of the most views on our entire channel. So definitely worth checking out on the Security Forward. That's SecurityFWD channel on YouTube. All right. Oh, and Zam also is recommending at least 4 gigabytes for the Raspberry Pi. 4 or 400 if you're going to be trying to run these operating systems. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to the next question. Could you make a man-in-the-middle attack using a Raspberry Pi? Is it possible to do that with a D1 Mini, since you can host a network from it as is shown in the video? Okay, so this question has eluded me for years. So what they're asking about is a man-in-the-middle attack. That means basically like kicking someone off of the real Wi-Fi network they were connected to, having them connect to a different evil Wi-Fi network, and then serving them internet through that connection, but modifying the packets and basically acting as an evil router. So that's pretty cool. And you can do it on a Raspberry Pi because it's capable of acting like a router. It's able to do all sorts of stuff and run all sorts of programs on it. But on something like a D1 Mini, which which I happen to have one right here, this is a microcontroller that doesn't run an operating system. You have to program everything you want to do into it explicitly and upload a binary file that has all of those instructions in it. On a Raspberry Pi, it has an operating system, so you can connect to it either graphically or you can SSH into it via a terminal, and you can have it run all these programs, download and install these programs from inside the Raspberry Pi. You really cannot do that with the D1 Mini. I mean, in some edge cases after doing a bunch of work you can, but in this case you can't. And the other limitation here is networking. This has one Wi-Fi radio, and while there are some examples of how you can potentially use this as a network extender, basically. So I've seen projects that claim to make this a network extender, but the installation process is nuts. I have wasted a day trying to do it. I could never get it working. It is not something a beginner can do. It's not something I can do. So do people who are doing graduate studies in this field find ways of using this and release projects about it? Yes. Theoretically, it is possible to use this as a Wi-Fi extender, have this connect back to a Wi-Fi network, and use this as like a way of boosting a Wi-Fi signal. And potentially, yes, you could then make this malicious or evil and use it as a man-in-the-middle device. Is it easy? No. Can a beginner do it? No. Are there any projects that are well documented out there to do it? No. Can I name, like, could I do it given like a month if I was relieved of all my other responsibilities? Probably. So that's about how easy it is, just to let you know. But this is something that would be really, really cool if it did work. The amount of like networking and other stuff that's required in order to get this working is rather extreme, and you're really, really pushing the absolute limits of what this little device could do. Now, do I believe I could program this to do something like simple, like stripping of certain DNS packets or like ARP spoofing or something automated like this? Eventually, maybe, but it would be very, very difficult. And our friend Stefan initially set out to do ARP spoofing on a D1 Mini and very quickly found out that it is like prohibited in the firmware. Like you just can't do it. So the process to get this working is like extremely difficult, and I wish it were more simple, because these devices, you can find them for like $2 if you're willing to wait for a couple months for them to be delivered. But the drawback to that is, it's really not beginner stuff. It's much more advanced than the average attacker would use. And, the average person is going to want to use a Raspberry Pi Zero W in order to do this, because it is perfectly capable of doing that. It's a better fit for this project. Anybody could do it, and it costs like $10. So you might as well just use something that's better suited to the specific use case. James, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just want to add, so if you're talking about doing a man-in-the-middle attack where you used a Raspberry Pi to make a fake network to get devices to connect to it, you may want to, in that case, I don't know if my understanding here is messed up, but you could use a D1 Mini to de-auth devices on the existing network so that they are forced to connect to yours when the original one doesn't work, basically. I don't know if that would work, or if they would continue trying to connect to the original MAC address. But that's a thought. So you could steal the devices.
So there's a question from Zam, which is, did you ever make a video or write about cloning a repository and installing a Wi-Fi adapter not directly supported by Kali Linux? This is a nightmare. Yes, we have. This was, I think, like over a year, maybe 2 years ago. Back when we were doing stuff with Null Byte, and we did a video on using 5 gigahertz devices. I'm not sure if we cheated and just used one that was supported by Kali, but I think we didn't, and I think we had to install some drivers in order to do it. So we can absolutely do a like 5 gigahertz hacking video where like we use a driver, or we use a wireless network adapter that isn't natively supported by Kali but does have drivers available. The installation process is pretty simple, but man, there are a lot of problems that can happen for seemingly no reason. And sometimes the cards just act a little bit funky because the drivers are, not officially supported by Kali. So like there can be some issues. But yeah, we can definitely cover it. And I think 5 gigahertz hacking is a really interesting field because the D1 Mini, the microcontrollers, all the stuff that we were talking about do not support 5 gigahertz hacking. And in a lot of cases, if you have a card that supports 5 gigahertz, you might need to install a driver in order to get it up and running with Kali Linux. So they're doing a much better job of including really popular 5 gigahertz capable wireless network adapters in Kali. So I might have to struggle a little bit to find one that's not officially supported but has drivers available. But if you guys have any recommendations, please let us know in the chat, and maybe I'll pick one up on Amazon so we can specifically cover it. Because 5 gigahertz hacking is cool, and if you're a Wi-Fi hacker, you might run into the circumstance where you have a device, you attack it, you need to kick it off of a network and onto another one, and it just scoots itself from 2.4 gigahertz over to the 5 gigahertz network, and it's officially out of range for you. You cannot do anything to it unless you switch over to a wireless network adapter that supports 5 gigahertz. So it's becoming so popular now that the circumstance happens a lot. It didn't used to be very, very common, but nowadays it is pretty common. It is somewhat mitigated by the fact that most IoT devices, security cameras and stuff like that, don't support 5 gigahertz, but an increasing amount of them are. So if you're trying to do something like knock a security camera off a network to show that it's a bad idea to have Wi-Fi security cameras, it's switching over to 5 gigahertz could really mess up your little plan. So we will try to cover that, Sam, and it's a great suggestion. Another question was, I saw a paper on 3-minute papers that allows one to see people's location using Wi-Fi waves. Do you think this will have any effect for hacking or home security? So I, again, love Wi-Fi signals intelligence. And I can say that the average person has a cell phone with them most of the time. And if I want to track them rather precisely, I can point an antenna that's highly directional at that person's house and kind of scan back and forth and identify what specific room that they are in. So what's interesting about this is your phone fights for you a little bit. It will actually be able to in some ways hide its real MAC address to be able to make it harder to identify that it's the same device. But by sending out networks that I know you've connected to before, or even that match your home Wi-Fi network, I can trick your phone into putting out the same MAC address, or at least identifying itself enough that it can consistently track you no matter where you go. So I don't know a lot about this specific paper, but I do a lot of research into Wi-Fi privacy and security. And this is something that is very, very easy to do, even with something like the Andromeda D author, which is a project myself, James, and also our friend Stefan have all been collaborating on, that allows you to mount a directional antenna onto a D1 Mini and basically do signal hunting for specific devices. And also do countermeasures for MAC address randomization that's supposed to preserve your privacy. So if I wanted to basically track you around your house, know what room you were in, know when you were gone or when you were home, I could do that very, very easily, just sending out signals and reading what signals come back on a very inexpensive device like the Andromeda D author. Or if you wanted to buy a D1 Mini Pro, get in there, resolder a super tiny grain of sand size 0 ohm resistor, and try not to accidentally blow it off or get it stuck to your tweezers while you're moving it, then you can use one of those too after mounting an adapter and slapping on some sort of directional antenna. So it is possible to do this on extremely cheap devices. It just takes a little bit of extra work. And frankly, I really like the work that we did on the Andromeda D author. Oh no, I have one right here. So with this exact setup, I could point this highly directional panel antenna, plug this little ESP8266 based microcontroller into my computer, and track where a signal's coming from. So if my neighbor was stealing my Wi-Fi and I wanted to prove it was them, I could plug this in, identify the device that's using internet that's not supposed to be, and sweep this around until I found where the signal was coming from. So it's pretty startling how much you can learn over Wi-Fi and just signals in general. So again, signals intelligence is super cool. You can learn about what people are doing through walls and through technologies like Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. So really good question, and I really hope that people are interested, because I would love to explore that a little bit more. We've already done the what's in the box tutorial, where we have 2 boxes. One of them has a rogue device, and we have to figure out which is which by signal strength. But yeah, it's really cool that you can actually find that sort of thing with a cheap and simple device. All right, let me scan through the chat and see if there's any. Have you seen any other good questions, James?
Somebody asked about HTB. I think they're talking about Hack the Box. Somebody said that they don't like it. I actually think Hack the Box is pretty good in terms of CTF platforms. And I know several other friends that are more into this than I am that would recommend it. So if you're new to it, it's a pretty good place to look at. Other than that, what's the other place? Try Hack Me is another good platform, assuming I'm interpreting HTB correctly.
So we had a question on Nullbyte. Am I back there or what's going on? So I don't currently record videos for Nullbyte. We've been on a hiatus with them for, I think, like 4 months now. So the reason why you see me with like much shorter hair and like in Los Angeles is not because I'm flying back to Los Angeles and getting rapid haircuts. It's because, we made so many Nullbyte videos that like they literally just have them stacked up. So I don't know. I think we might do a live stream with them in the near-ish future. So stay tuned for that. We're currently in talks about that. But for now, there's probably not going to be any new Nullbyte videos from us. If you want to see new content, you should check out Hack 5, where we're going to be doing a totally new show, which is really, really exciting. And guess who's going to be on that show? Do we know anyone, James, who might be on that show on Hack 5?
Maybe just.
Maybe just.
Maybe just.
Is that all?
Your favorite Michael 3.
Yeah, so it looks like
be on there.
It looks like Howdy Burgers is going to make an appearance on Hack 5. So if you guys don't know about Hack 5, it is a YouTube channel that's been around for a really long time teaching people about hacking. We are really excited to work with them, and James is going to be joining us on launching a new show there. So while, again, we're not really going to be working on Nullbyte in the immediate future, if you want to see our newest content, make sure to check out Hack 5 because we're going to be releasing new stuff there, as well as here, of course. So yeah, that's a great question, and people are very perceptive. Like I hope they know that we're not going to like a wooden cabin and then Los Angeles and then like back to the wooden cabin and then like down here for some reason. It's like it's confusing. So let's see. Zam also suggested a video on Wi-Fi triangulation. That would be super cool. There's also, I would love to do WiGle WiFi without doxing myself. It's kind of hard though. But WiGle WiFi is a really cool for Wi-Fi trilateralization that allows you to identify the location of lots of devices, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, just by walking around an area and taking multiple readings of signal strength. So, I mean, you can do that manually as well, but, we've covered so much stuff with Wi-Fi. We've covered how like in a mall or in an area with like poor reception for GPS, you can spoof a bunch of Wi-Fi networks that make you think that you are in Mark Zuckerberg's pool. So it just like drops your pin like in his backyard because like the signals make it your phone submit those Wi-Fi networks to a server that identifies where you are by what networks are around you. And it's like, oh, you're by Zuck's pool. And it returns that location. And if you try to like navigate yourself or like take a picture, it will be tagged with Mark Zuckerberg's pool.
That's amazing.
Right? And if you try to like do a social media post, it'll tag you Mark Zuckerberg's pool. So like it's the things you can do with Wi-Fi to like manipulate like location and like do all sorts of like interesting stuff are really abstract and they work in multiple different ways. So very interesting topic, and I think that we will try to cover it more. It's just difficult to try and not dox ourselves. So yeah.
Sam says we can do it at one of his public locations.
We do have our crew in Los Angeles who are bored and could just drive around potentially and like record some stuff on WiGle, and we could just use those screenshots and like explain what's going on. Whatever, we'll figure something out. We can get some sample data that's not like our house, and then I'm sure we could put something together that explains how it works, because location and Wi-Fi are very tied together. Most people don't realize by taking a single Wi-Fi network around you and submitting it to an API, anybody can find out exactly where you are. In fact, I wrote this payload for, I think it was for like the Wi-Fi Duck and for the USB rubber ducky, that allows you to inject a script that will query like what Wi-Fi network someone is nearby or connected to, send it to an outside server, and an attacker can basically figure out where you are every time it pings this, because they can just submit the Wi-Fi networks that are near you and figure out exactly where you are. The reason for this is Google drove around and basically like took readings of where every Wi-Fi network that they encountered while they were creating Google Street View was located, and saved this to like a server that anybody can query. So there are a lot of other there's a lot of other different like services out there that do essentially the same thing, that have a database of where all these wireless devices are transmitting so that you can geolocate someone. But if you've ever gotten a warning on your phone when you're using an app that uses Wi-Fi or Bluetooth that you need to enable location data, guess why? It's because if the app can access Bluetooth beacons or Wi-Fi, it can like just send that to an API and log exactly where you are. So they had to start slapping this on Bluetooth devices, because like people who made Bluetooth apps would make physical beacons and put them in locations so that they could track you when you went into like McDonald's and like all these other stuff by running in the background and sniffing for these known beacons. And then they would create vast networks of beacons, sell the data to each other, and have a service that works basically the same way by exchanging like location beacon data and constantly scanning for it in the background. So like, I think it was like Burger King or something had like a massive amount of like I shouldn't call out specific brands. It was, let's say, a fast food manufacturer, because I don't remember if it was Burger King, but I kind of think it was, had like an app that requested so much data that they were basically like if you were worried about the NSA, like the default permissions that this like fast food application like requested were far worse. They could like read and write to your phone. They could like wipe stuff if they like. It was crazy. Like they really had like a lot of stuff. A lot of it was based on location and knowing where you were, where you had been, so they could sell that data or use that data or process it somehow. So it was like pretty eye-opening that, you know, a phone running Bluetooth only would be able to grab a beacon and know every time you pass by like a particular fast food restaurant, or by a network of beacons set up by advertisers and other people who want to know where you've been. So any app on your phone that requests like permission, like location permission, could potentially do this. It is a real danger, and it's been exploited so much by these people who want to track you that it is now baked into Android phones that they have to beg for this permission just to use the Wi-Fi or Bluetooth radios. Did you know that, James?
Yeah, it's pretty scary actually that people can find your location without even accessing GPS. When I first found out about that, I was like, what? But
so the reason why I was reminded of that is our roommate was trying to connect to a Bluetooth thermometer, and like he's just like, why does this stupid thermometer need to know where I live in order to work? So he kept denying it. So it denied it Bluetooth permission, and he couldn't connect to it. So like this went on for like a full day, and he was like just ranting about how terrible of a product it was. It was like, hey dude, like advertisers ruin this for everyone. Like now you have to like give it theoretical permission to identify where you are. And it's not even access to your GPS. It's just permission to access the Bluetooth radio just to get this stupid Bluetooth thermometer to work. So if this has ever happened to you, that's why. Like just these people were so ravenous to know exactly where you've been that they built literally a series of Bluetooth beacon networks that could identify you every time you went within range, and push these things through just like, you know, paying developers money through like tons of different apps to be able to have a very good shot of having at least one of these apps running, sniffing, and identifying you, and selling this information to a coordinated network of advertisers who track your every move. So yeah, signals intelligence, lots of fun, right? Not only do you need to worry about people stalking you, but also you have to worry about people setting up infrastructure, like hostile infrastructure, and then injecting code into an app running on your phone from like, you know, a fast food restaurant that's constantly scanning for these malicious beacons that will ping back and identify when you've been to a certain location and ravenously track and sell that data. Pretty creepy.
we had a question from Anthony, which I removed. He asked, how do I get my neighbor's Wi-Fi password? And there was actually a really good answer by Taylor. So go up to them and, after COVID, ask them nicely. And yeah, that's the legal way to do that.
That tends to be the most successful way to do that. Very good. Let's see. Oh yeah, sorry, Anthony. Good luck. I will say, if you can't Google that question, then it's not for the lack of information out there, because I know I've written at least 4 guides on that. Let's see. Thoughts on Samy Kamkar's garage door and credit card hacking exploits. How do you think hacking will start to impact cars going forward in the future? So this is a really good question because we did a podcast with our friend who's really interested in automated or smart car hacking. So like adversarial attacks on the way that infrastructure will work to deal with vehicles like Teslas and other cars that are working in an automated fashion to obey like road signs and process information in an automated way. So Vic came on and showed us all about how we could expect in the future different things to start like messing with vehicles. So if you're interested in that, that's her current field of study. Her name is Vic Harkness, and I will find her Twitter while I stall for a second.
We stall for a second?
No, sorry, while you stall for a second. Go.
Well, I stall for a second.
Yeah.
Right. Do we want to go to the next question?
Yeah, do
after you find the Twitter? So I can't actually see the questions, so Kody, can you tell me what the question is?
Oh, sure. I sure can. Wow, it's really long. Thanks for doing this. I tinker with OpenBSD, but have no knowledge of Go or Rust. Oh, this is perfect for you. But
Oh, no.
PKG _ info shows Go, blah, 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 and Rust, blah, blah, blah. I suspect that although the packages are available, porting an existing package is a different matter. The fdisk installer feels super retro down to the lettering where C is in the whole disk, not A. I'm not suggesting trying it, but why not look at NetBSD and all the crazy stuff it can run on from the BSD world? I believe that question's to you.
Well, right then, Max. I doubt Max is here, but so in terms of OpenBSD and Rust and Go, I didn't look any further into Rust or Go, and I didn't research Go at all. I think, Kody, you looked into that briefly. In terms of Rust, I was trying to compile it natively, and I couldn't. Compiling natively on OpenBSD isn't supported, basically. So I'm not sure about cross-compiling, but I would need to do more research to look into that. In terms of other BSD operating systems, we are considering not OpenBSD. We're considering FreeBSD and NetBSD, so we may look at those. I think NetBSD has a smaller audience than OpenBSD, though, so we'll probably only do that one if it's interesting enough, because if something's already smaller than OpenBSD, that kind of hints to me that it may be even harder to use, but that's an assumption, so we'll take a look when the time comes.
All right, I found Vic's Twitter. So if you want to know about smart car hacking or future car hacking, or how you can hijack the kind of future infrastructure that's going to be used to control intelligent or connected vehicles, Vic likes falcons and hacking cars. So you should check out some of her recent talks. She really does a lot of fantastic work on this, and she's also a lot of fun to have on the show. So if you guys are interested, we could probably have her back to talk about this. We had her on the podcast, so it's been quite some time since we talked to her, but it was really fantastic because she came on to talk about actually facial recognition, and we did an entire episode on Hack 5 based on an interview we did with her. Oh yeah, I forgot. So our very best Hack 5 episode ever was a facial recognition episode where we had a great interview with Vic at DEF CON. So check out that episode and check out some of her work on hacking smart cars of the future if you want to know more about that. But back to the original question, Samy Kamkar's garage door and credit card hacking exploits. Like, Samy Kamkar is really great at taking like known vulnerabilities for these systems and making them so easy to demonstrate that everybody is just, their mind is blown by these demos. So like, he always finds something that is like so straightforward and so cool that it's just a perfect example of this problem that gets everybody to kind of wake up and pay attention. So the garage door, and some of the other exploits he's done with, like being able to capture like a rolling code for like certain cars and stuff. Like, it's just so cool and interesting. I think it's fucking great, and I would absolutely love to work with him at some point because, yeah, we were both in Southern California for a while, and I'm no longer there. but we always would like be at the same conferences, and I've seen his couple talks by him, but I still haven't had the chance to interview him. So yeah, at some point I would
I have
love.
his Discord.
Yeah. At some point we should definitely reach out and maybe do something, because he's made so many incredibly cool tools that I would love to show off. I can name a couple, like Skyhook. I think it was Skyhook was the drone hacking one, where by mounting like a Raspberry Pi under a
Skyjack.
drone, Skyjack, yeah, you can take over another drone and just like fly it away. And you can mount it on like a really terrible cheap drone and like take over like a really nice expensive drone because it uses Wi-Fi to communicate. So this stuff is really cool, and he manages to find, again, just these ways of showing off proof of concepts that I think are amazing and very eye-catching and visual. So I think it's a great way of getting, just beginners or anybody that wants to see the magic of hacking started with understanding how cool these things could really be. All right, let's check out another question. Hey, James, it's for you. Do you know if OpenBSD has a CoC? Can't find any, and I feel that they are not inclusive.
So I wasn't sure if CoC meant community of contributors, or what was the other possibility that we came up with?
Code of conduct.
Code of conduct. So the structure of OpenBSD specifically, it seems like to me anyway, is more of a, you can write something and submit it to us, and we will consider putting it in OpenBSD. Or you can write an improvement to a OpenBSD organization project and put it forward to us, and we will consider implementing your changes, rather than a more kind of thing where it's like, yeah, implement a PR, and if it looks good, we'll do it. Because it seems like the OpenBSD project is a bit more closed off than other open source projects, and they want to keep it strictly close to the purposes of the project in the developer's eyes, it seems like. So that's that. Okay, I can talk about Stefan's question if you want.
Yeah. Oh my god. Well, one thing I want to clarify off the top of my head, I don't remember, is 802.11w protected management frames? Please answer, and I'll answer the rest of Zam's question. But go on, James.
Yeah, so I am American, but I currently live in the UK, and what Stefan is referring to there is, following Brexit, the UK introduced a law to do with their VAT. So the sales tax kind of is how you would compare it. And it used to be that if you were buying something from outside of the UK and you are within the UK, under a certain amount, like, I don't know, it was 100 or a couple £100 or something like that, you wouldn't have to pay VAT at all. So that was nice. And if it was over a certain amount, the VAT was paid by the person buying it. And recently there was a law that the government implemented that now says VAT has to be paid by the person selling the item, which also means that no matter where your company is in the world, if you want to sell to people in the UK, you have to register with the UK's tax authority and pay them VAT, which is a pain, especially for small businesses, especially like our friend Stefan. So it's reasonably upsetting.
So, okay, after further clarification, 802.11w is protected management frame. So the Wi-Fi deauthor, which is the famous project Stefan has worked on, that you might have seen in some iteration or another, is based on the ability to inject management frames that temporarily disconnect somebody from a Wi-Fi network. Now, if you implement 802.11w, this will protect or authenticate those management frames and prevent arbitrary people on the outside from easily spoofing these on a low-end device like an ESP8266. So there is something that we can do about that as hackers. So a little bit of a spoiler, but Stefan and I are working to implement some work by Matthew Van Hoff that allows us to effectively deauthenticate or execute a similar denial of service attack against any Wi-Fi device using beacon frames. So by advertising malicious information in the beacon frame, that allows us to basically set the data rate so low that no meaningful communication can occur, or sets the latency that that particular device needs to wait before it's allowed to transmit so high that the device has no chance to transmit before other devices start using the wireless medium and it has to start waiting again Both of these techniques are able to effectively use beacon frames to produce the same kinds of attacks that you'll see executing a deauthentication attack. Now there are some other side effects where you might not be able to produce a handshake if that's what you wanted to do. But if what you're looking to do is disconnect a device from a network or otherwise meaningfully be able to like prevent it from meaningfully connecting and pulling down data, then there are attacks that will work even if you're using 802.11w by changing beacon frames to actually be malicious and just putting malicious data inside them. So I was kind of blown away by this technique because I thought that like deauth packets were the most dangerous packets, but it turns out there's a lot of stuff you can do with beacon frames. So Stefan and I are going to be looking at ways we can implement more subtle and difficult to detect attacks into future versions of our Wi-Fi attack platforms, name yet to be determined. But yeah, it's a really exciting kind of field of research to know that there's so many different packets that can just really mess up a Wi-Fi connection. So as the defenders developed technologies like 802.11w that prevent us from using some of these really easy to do attacks that have been out there for years and years and years, we will also be able to adapt to that and start doing new attacks that force them to up their game even more, because currently beacon frames are not authenticated, but in the new Wi-Fi standard, it's proposed that they will be because of the exact attacks that Stefan and I are looking at rolling out and making more accessible to people that are interested in Wi-Fi hacking. So if you guys want to like see some of our research on that, it's still in its very early phases, but it's something that is really cool and interesting to know about how you could hack Wi-Fi devices, even using packets that most people assume are just, advertising networks around you. So really, really cool. And yeah, also thank you to Stefan in the chat for answering some of these questions. The original question by Zam is whether or not there is an easy way to detect whether a device supports 802.11w. So if you're using like the Wi-Fi deauthor, like is there a way to tell whether or not you're basically prohibited from attacking this network with the deauth packets because it will not accept deauthentication packets that aren't authenticated. I'm going to have to double check to make sure that disassociation packets are also authenticated, but I imagine they are because they're all management frames. But yeah, so basically any management frame like a disassociation or deauthentication packet that could disconnect someone will be authenticated. But interestingly, not beacon frames. So these attacks that I was just discussing will still work. That's a good question. And for Jonathan, I don't know, like offhand, I don't remember the exact difference between 802.11 dot different acronyms, but I think if you just look up 802.11w, the first thing that comes up is protected management frames. 802.11 AC is it's a subset of protocols for high throughput wireless local LAN access on the 5 gigahertz band. So I think 802.11 AC is 5 gigahertz because I've seen that around installing drivers that support 5 gigahertz as well. Again, I could be wrong. I just know that when I looked up 802.11w, it specifically had to do with the protected management frames. And also that is what Zam says. And Zam is very smart. So let's see. Our next question is about the Wi-Fi Duck. So I feel like, Stefan, this question is really for you. This question is incredulous and ends with the word lol. And this is on our video, Hacking Computers from Blocks Away with the Wi-Fi Duck. Now, in this video, we took a Wi-Fi duck, and then when our victim got up from their seat in a coffee shop to use the bathroom, we plugged it in, very quickly ran some code from about a block away while I was sitting a couple seats down, so it wasn't obvious I was interacting with their computer. And then before they came back, I pulled out the Wi-Fi duck with fishing wire, and the back door had already been planted. Just a little example of how someone could take like 2 minutes of time you spend away from your computer to tell somebody what payload to run based on what operating system you're using, and then execute that in a matter of moments. So their comment to that very impressive display was, so you have to put the USB stick on the computer you are wanting to hack. Lol. So I guess the implication here is it would be much more cool if you could hack the computer by like looking at it and being like, do what I say. But unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. This attack is basically like the USB rubber ducky. So with the USB rubber ducky, you would have to like look at their computer, identify what operating system they were using, make sure the right program was loaded on the USB rubber ducky, walk over, plug it in, wait for it to run, and then unplug it. Okay, Fine. But what if they're not using an operating system you expected? Or what if you want to have some flexibility with the payload? Well, Stefan created this great tool called the Wi-Fi Duck, which is a combination of a ESP8266 and an AT-Mini 32, whatever. It doesn't matter. Two microcontrollers.
Arduino microcontroller.
Yeah. And the point of it is it allows you to act as a keyboard remotely. So you could be a really long distance away. You could be on your phone. You can be from any device that can connect over Wi-Fi to connect to this web interface and either run preloaded scripts that you've written and saved, or like write scripts on the fly and run them. Super, super cool, and allows you to, you can even script this so that the second it's plugged in and starts broadcasting, you connect to the network and run a script over command line too. So you don't even need to use a web browser in order to do this. I've written optimization scripts. So it basically loops and just looks for the network to pop up. And as soon as it's plugged in, it instantly runs whatever script I want it to, just to make it as fast as possible. So I was pretty impressed by this, but if you guys are insisting on us just having like a stern look hack a computer, well, we'll keep working. I mean, damn, like you guys have some high standards. Like we're over here designing tools that can work from like a mile away once you stick it in the computer. Like you could be like on a rooftop, like escaped, and like they wouldn't even know it was you, and you still want us to just glare at a computer and hack it. All right, we'll work on it.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, you need physical access for the attack. Okay.
Yeah.
You need that for sometimes. It's a USB attack vector. I don't know how you would do that wirelessly.
Yeah. Oh, and then we have one last question. I think it's our last question. Yeah, it is our last question from Aspeak Gaming. Hi, by the way. Thank you for tuning into your streams. I've seen your name a lot on the last several streams. Can't find your guys' Twitter. Wanted to share a hack using Morse code. So a couple people have shared with us this really interesting hack where somebody was using Morse code to communicate malware and like get around, basically using that as steganography and like getting around detection by using Morse code. Really old school, kind of funny, pretty cool. And if you want to know our Twitters, then my Twitter is my full name, which is pretty easy to remember. So I'll switch over on my screen in just a second because I have no idea what people have posted and I don't endorse. There we go. All right. So if you want to switch over, this is my Twitter. Feel free to follow me. I post a lot of stuff related to the show, as well as just general InfoSec stuff that I go over at the end of our week on Friday. So I'm pretty plugged into the hacker community, the maker community, and just the security researcher community. So I'm often sharing stuff that is from, for example, people like Patrick Wardle, who does exclusively research on macOS vulnerabilities. So if you're interested in macOS hacking, there's lots of stuff that I like to share that is related to hacking in general. So that's where you can find me. And you can also find James, or Jams, right here. And of course, you can recognize him by Thomas.
The cat.
Yeah. Yeah, so
He's being feisty right now. I would get him.
Feel free to follow both of us. James, what is your banner on Twitter?
That's a good question. I don't even think I have one.
You don't. It's just like a gray space.
Oh no.
James,
okay.
you have 52 followers. You have responsibilities now. Guys, come on. Help out James here. Let's see if we can get over 100 followers for James. Here's what's going to happen. If you guys get over 100 followers for James, he will make a banner that isn't just a gray rectangle. How about that, you guys? Fun challenge for James.
Wow. I'll do it. I commit.
Yeah, and I'm sure James will post all sorts of exciting updates and news about the Hunator as development proceeds with it.
Yes, of course. That's me. I'll do that. my last like tweet was a retweet in July, but one day I'll get around to it. Tweeting.
All right, I think that we are up on our time now, but I wanted to thank everybody for all the questions that we've got in the chat. It was super active today, and I love doing these live Q&As. You guys have questions that actually make me really think back to stuff I haven't done in like a year or two. And fortunately, we have a lot of great reference stuff we can send you to as well. Zam has also been amazing at dropping in some of the links. We'll also try to be good about that as well. So when we talk about stuff or when we reference like a piece of material. Hopefully we can drop in some links as well. And Michael in the background has also been secretly working to divide everything into chapters. So if you're going back and looking through our live streams, you'll notice that everything is broken up all nicely into chapters, so you can go through and just pick out the information you want if you don't want to sit through the whole stream. So thank you guys so much for all of your questions today. Oh, I'm sorry. Stefan is demanding to know when new Hunator features will be released. Sounds like your boss is mad, dude.
Yeah, so there's actually a lot of new features that are ready, but I'm yet to test them because I keep forgetting. So whenever I get around to doing that, I can then merge them and make a new binary. So it's coming. And Zam doesn't want us to forget his Twitter too, and as he's the best moderator.
He really is. I'm so sorry. So if you want to switch back to my screen, you can also follow Zam at this Twitter handle right here. And yeah, as he is now responsible for Kelly NetHunter and a lot of the other things that you guys have requested, highly recommend checking him out because, of course, he provides all this useful information every time we do a stream, and frankly does a better job than we do sometimes at making sure people get the help they need, getting their questions answered when we're presenting. So thank you so much for everything. Again, it was wonderful to receive this care package with a, probably backdoored phone that we're going to put Kali NetHunter on and play around with. So yeah, thank you to Zam for the care package, the 3D printed toilet paper, and the plaque to 2020 all very much lifted our spirits. All right, so that's all we've got today. Thank you to Michael number 3, aka James, for sticking with us through another Q&A. It was great to be able to answer some of your more technical questions about like core booting and operating systems that we've covered. And hopefully you guys have liked our tear of having James on as a host, teaching about operating systems, virtualization, and some of the other stuff that, yeah, he is good at. So thank you, James. I think everybody's really enjoyed, the little change in pace here, Michael's little vacation, and getting to learn about some operating systems they might have heard of but never actually got to see running or see how easy or difficult it is to set up.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Cool. And as always, if you guys have ideas for operating systems, we want to hear them. So drop them in the comments on this video on YouTube, on SecurityFWD, and also we will be listing on here as well. So as always, make sure to check out the other Varonis brand channels because they are our sponsors. The show would not exist without their generous support of time and resources. We wouldn't have lights and we wouldn't have time to do this show if it wasn't for them. So on the Varonis brand channel, you'll see our sometimes host Killian also hosting the Threat Update show, where we go through some of the threats that real large businesses are actually facing and what they're doing to stop them. So if you want to get into cybersecurity, it's a great place to start learning about what kind of threats real businesses face up against and what they're looking for. And then if you're looking to get any security certifications, we are also starting a new show with our my colleague Mike, where he's going to be doing the Security Certification Study Hour, where he goes through and studies for the CISSP. If you guys want to check that out, I'm actually not sure what day we're going to be running that on. Hopefully that information will be dropped. I believe it's on Mondays at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. So check that out on Mondays going forward. We're going to be doing this new show. I'm sure Mike will want all the friends he can get. And again, this is a really great way of just learning about what it takes to get a security certification if you want to break into the industry. The first one went really well. You can check it out on the SecurityFWD YouTube channel if you want to see what it's like. And hopefully we'll see you there. So, all right, everyone, we will see you on Friday. And until then, have a good one. Bye.